Picture this, a packed stadium, the Dodgers trailing and thousands of fans on their feet, and in the middle of all that chaos, two kids in matching white outfits are about to witness something that has nothing to do with the scoreboard at all, because sometimes the biggest moment of a baseball game isn't the swing of the bat, it's what happens after the cheering stops. And that's exactly what unfolded on the night the Dodgers edged past the Royals 6-5, a game that would have been forgotten by most fans within a week if not for a single gesture from Shohei Ohtani that turned a routine post-game moment into something people are still talking about. And to understand why it mattered, you have to go back a few days, back to an offhand promise Ohtani made almost in passing, the kind of promise adults make to children all the time without really thinking it through, the kind where you say sure, I'll get you something, and move on with your life while the kid holds onto every single word like it's a sacred vow. And that's precisely what happened with Max Muncy's two kids, Sophia and Wyatt, because once Ohtani mentioned he'd bring them presents, that was it, there was no forgetting it, no matter how busy the season got. So every single time their dad packed up to head to the ballpark, the same question came flying at him: did Uncle Shohei bring the presents yet? Over and over, game after game. Until Muncy started telling them to just go ask the man himself instead of interrogating him about it every single day. And honestly, even Muncy admitted there were nights during that brutal stretch of games where he wondered if Ohtani had simply forgotten. Because let's be real, this is a guy hitting, pitching, traveling, doing media, living what is probably the busiest schedule of any athlete on the planet right now, so a passing comment to a couple of kids could easily slip through the cracks. Except it didn't. And that's the first thing that makes this story worth telling, because on the night Sophia and Wyatt were set to be part of the ceremonial first pitch, dressed in white, standing near the field they'd only ever watched from the stands, Ohtani showed up, and he didn't just remember, he went completely overboard, because instead of small toys or something easy to carry, he brought two absolutely massive Hello Kitty plushies. The kind that look like they belong in a parade rather than a kid's bedroom, and the second Sophia laid eyes on hers, she didn't hesitate for a second, she sprinted over and wrapped her arms around it like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. Which in a way she had, given how many days she'd spent asking about it. But here's where the story gets funny, because affection is one thing and physics is another, and when she tried to actually pick the thing up, it barely budged. So she looked up with this completely serious expression on her face and basically declared that this was supposed to be her Hello Kitty and she couldn't even lift it. And if you've ever watched a kid confront a problem that's bigger than they are, both literally and figuratively, you know exactly the look she must have had, pure determination mixed with total confusion about why the universe was working against her. And standing right next to her the whole time was Wyatt, who watched his sister struggle and, as little brothers tend to do, immediately assumed he could do better, because he's a boy, and in his mind that apparently meant something when it came to lifting oversized stuffed animals, so he dove in with total confidence, and the result was exactly the same. The plush didn't move an inch for him either, and at that point both kids just sort of gave up on the idea of carrying their prizes anywhere, settling instead for hugging them tightly or dragging them along the ground inch by inch, which prompted Muncy, watching the whole scene unfold, to turn to his teammate and ask him straight up whether he was trying to give his kids presents or put them through a strength training session. And Ohtani's response to that was just a laugh, because in trying to be generous he'd accidentally created a logistical nightmare, and since he was the one who caused this mess with two plushies roughly the size of the children carrying them, he ended up being the one who had to bend down and scoop them both up himself, walking along behind the kids with a giant Hello Kitty tucked under each arm, like some kind of overqualified delivery man. And if the story ended right there, it would already be a pretty charming little anecdote, the kind of thing that gets a few seconds on a highlight reel and then fades away. But it didn't end there, because just a few hours earlier in the 6th inning of that same game, Max Muncy had done something that actually mattered on the field. Something that had nothing to do with plush toys and everything to do with why professional athletes get paid millions of dollars to play a kid's game. He ripped a ball down the right field line, a screaming line drive that turned into a bases-clearing hit, 3-run scoring, and just like that, the Dodgers flipped a losing game into a winning one, right in front of his own children, who were sitting in the stands watching their dad become, for that one inning, the single most important person on the entire field. And yet, and this is the part that stings a little if you think about it from a parent's perspective, by the time the game ended and Ohtani showed up with his oversized gifts, that home run, that career highlight, that moment of pure paternal glory had basically evaporated from the kids' minds, because in front of them stood Shohei Ohtani, arguably the most famous baseball player alive, and he was holding presents, and kids, being kids, are drawn to whatever is directly in front of them. So their eyes were locked on him with that unmistakable look of childhood hero worship, the kind of stare that says this person is larger than life. And Muncy, who was standing right there, watching his own children practically forget he existed, later admitted that in that exact moment he'd been demoted instantly from hero to afterthought. And look, that's a funny thing to say out loud, but there's a real emotional undercurrent to it too, because what parent hasn't felt that exact sting at some point, watching their kid get completely starstruck by someone else while the thing you actually did gets brushed aside. And this is where most people, most athletes even, would have just smiled, patted the kids on the head, soaked up the adoration and called it a day. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody would have blamed Ohtani for simply enjoying being the center of attention for a few minutes. But instead of doing that, instead of letting the spotlight sit entirely on himself, he did something almost impulsive. He pointed directly at Muncy, standing right there next to him, and said a single sentence that changed the entire emotional direction of the moment. "Stop looking at me like that," he told them. "Today's Dodgers hero is your dad," and that's it, that's the whole line. It took maybe 2 seconds to say, but in those 2 seconds, something shifted. Sophia and Wyatt's attention, which had been locked so tightly on Ohtani, suddenly snapped over to their father standing beside him, and all that excitement, all that wide-eyed wonder they'd been feeling toward their favorite player, it didn't disappear, it just got redirected, pointed straight at their dad, and combined with the vague memory of watching him smash that go-ahead hit just hours earlier, that redirected attention turned into something much deeper than simple excitement. It turned into genuine, visible pride, the kind of look kids give their parents when they suddenly realize, "Oh wait, my dad is actually kind of amazing." And in the post-game interview when reporters asked Muncy about it, he was pretty candid that Ohtani probably wasn't overthinking the moment when he said it. It likely just came out naturally, the way things do when you're comfortable around teammates and their families. But for a father, hearing the person your kids admire most in the entire world go out of his way to redirect that admiration toward you, that's not something that fades quickly. That's the kind of memory that outlasts the final score by years. And when reporters later caught up with Sophia in the family area to ask her about the whole thing, what she remembered wasn't vague or fuzzy the way you might expect from a young kid. Recounting a busy night, it was sharp and specific. She immediately brought up the promise itself, explaining that Uncle Shohei had told them a few days earlier he'd get each of them a present, and that her dad had warned her the team was really busy lately so he might forget. But she said she just knew somehow that he wouldn't, and so they waited, and when asked to describe the moment the gifts actually showed up, her whole energy shifted into pure excitement. She talked about being so happy. She just ran straight over and hugged it immediately, about how much she loves Hello Kitty. But then, almost as an aside, she mentioned that the plush was bigger than her actual body, that she could hug it just fine but there was no way she could carry it, that she thought maybe she could lift it a little but it turned out to be way too heavy, even dragging it across the ground was a struggle. And when asked about her brother jumping in to try his luck, she burst out laughing remembering it. Describing how Wyatt had been standing right next to her the whole time, watching her struggle, and then just dove in thinking he'd have better luck because in his mind, being a boy meant he'd obviously do better, except the results were identical, he couldn't lift it either. And eventually they both just stood there and watched as Uncle Shohei himself grunted and hauled both giant bears off on his own. And she said watching him carry 2 huge bears at once was honestly one of the funniest parts of the whole night. But then when the conversation shifted to the part of the night that actually stuck with her emotionally, her tone changed. She explained that at first, all she was thinking about was the present and about Ohtani himself. He's tall, he's got this big presence, and he'd just given her exactly what she wanted. But then he said something that made her suddenly look over at her dad. That line about today's hero being her father, and she connected it immediately to what she'd seen happen on the field earlier that night. She remembered sitting in the stands watching her dad swing so hard, watching the ball roll all the way out to the outfield, watching 3 of his teammates come sprinting home while the whole stadium roared. She remembered that her team had been losing, and then suddenly they weren't, and she said that when Ohtani brought that moment back up, it reminded her all over again that her father had just done something genuinely incredible, and she closed her thoughts by drawing a clear line between the toy and the feeling, saying that yes, she still loves the present and yes, she's absolutely sleeping with it tonight, but that what she really wanted people to know wasn't how enormous the Hello Kitty was, it was that because of what Uncle Shohei said, she got to feel proud of her dad, that tonight, her father was truly a hero, and if you stop and sit with that for a second, that's a pretty remarkable thing for a kid to articulate that. She was able to separate the thrill of getting a gift from a famous athlete from the deeper emotional experience of realizing her father did something worth being proud of, and that separation didn't happen on its own. It happened because one sentence, spoken almost casually by someone else, pointed her attention in the right direction. And this is exactly the angle that a legendary former manager picked up on when he broke the moment down during the post-game broadcast. He framed it in a way that had nothing to do with box scores or stats. He said that the biggest impact a star can have isn't always about pulling all the attention toward themselves. Sometimes it's about deliberately stepping aside and handing the spotlight to somebody else, right at the exact moment it matters most. He pointed out that in baseball you see plenty of talented players come through, but what actually defines the size of a player's character often has nothing to do with what they do between the lines. It's what they do when nobody's specifically asking them to do anything at all. And when the host brought up exactly how Ohtani handled the situation with the 2 kids, the analyst dug even deeper into it. He explained that in that moment, Ohtani clearly understood exactly where all of Sophia and Wyatt's emotional energy was pointed, and he asked the audience to imagine it from the kids' perspective for a second. A promise that got kept, 2 absolutely enormous gifts, and a face-to-face moment with arguably the most famous baseball player on the planet. Of course they were going to be starstruck, that's a completely natural reaction, but what stood out, according to him, was that Ohtani didn't just let that adoration sit on himself and stay there. He didn't treat it as something owed to him, something to simply accept and move on from. And then the analyst walked through exactly what that pointed gesture accomplished. He described it as something like flipping a switch, redirecting an entire current of emotion. All that intensity the kids had been feeling toward Ohtani got rerouted instantly toward Muncy, the actual father standing right there, and because of that one line, the hit the kids had watched from the stands stopped being just another number, 6-5 on a scoreboard, and became something far more personal, far more meaningful. He basically took an ordinary sports moment and turned it into a family memory. And then the analyst brought up something a lot of people don't like to talk about openly, which is the flip side of having a gravitational pull as strong as Ohtani's. He explained that superstars at that level, without doing anything wrong at all, can sometimes accidentally overshadow the people around them just by existing. Just by walking into a room, every eye in the place turns toward them automatically. It's not a conscious choice by anyone, it's just what happens when someone is that famous. But in this specific case, he said, Ohtani did something almost the opposite of that. He actually used that same magnetic pull, that same overwhelming attention as a tool. He leveraged the fact that every eye in the vicinity was already on him to make sure Muncy's achievement landed even harder, even clearer, in his kids' eyes than it would have otherwise, essentially borrowing his own spotlight and redirecting the beam onto somebody else. And to wrap up his commentary, the analyst pulled back and offered a broader perspective on what kind of legacy a player like this actually leaves behind. He said that so much of the conversation around Ohtani focuses on the obvious stuff. The home runs, the stolen bases, the pitching numbers, all the statistical brilliance that gets replayed on highlight shows. But he argued that a player's real value isn't limited to the moments they create for themselves on the field. Sometimes it's found in the moments they choose to step back from. The instances where they consciously make room for a teammate to shine even brighter. And he closed by saying, that's really what separates a good teammate from a great one. Not the willingness to be the hero every single time, but the awareness of exactly when to hand that role off to somebody else. And honestly, when you put the whole night together, the missed home run moment, the accidental jealousy from two kids toward their own dad, the giant unliftable plush toys, the joke about strength training, and then that one quiet sentence that flipped everything back around, it paints a pretty vivid picture of what actually makes someone memorable in sports. It's rarely just about what shows up in the box score. It's about the small, almost throwaway decisions made in moments when nobody's really watching that closely, or rather when everyone is watching, but for the wrong reasons, and Ohtani noticing that, correcting it in real time, in front of two starstruck kids who probably won't fully appreciate the significance of it until they're much older. That's the kind of thing that tends to outlast even the best highlight reel. Because stats fade from memory, scores get forgotten. But a father hearing his daughter say she felt proud of him because of something a teammate said, that's the kind of story that sticks around for a very long time.